Certifications, the DA100, which Gavin has just said he passed. Congratulations, Gavin. So just a little bit about myself. So as Gavin mentioned, I'm a principal consultant at Altius. We recently got acquired by Avanade, which some of you might know, so large global Microsoft consultancy. So we're all part of the same company now, a data platform MVP, a chartered accountant, also a Data Analyst Associate, which you get from doing the DA100. So you'd be pleased to hear that I have actually sat the exam and passed it. Also Microsoft Certified Trainer, which is quite recent actually. And then two main communities I run at the moment. So one is called Learn Data Insights, which is all about quizzes and courses to help people prepare for the DA100 exam and other Microsoft exams as well. So that's going to be the focus of kind of today's session, and also Power Platform Finance. So this is kind of leveraging my background as an accountant. So we have fortnightly webinars on Power Platform finance related topics. So anything to do with financial modeling. We've had a few sessions on Dynamics integration of Power Platform, going to look at all sorts of things around kind of visualization, and it's a really Power Apps, Power Automate, CDS in terms of some of those processes. So really interested, even if you've worked with finance data or you're interested in that kind of space, then do check out some of the webinars on there. So today we're going to look at a few different things. So 4 key kind of questions that we want to answer with this session. So the first is, well, what is the DA100? Secondly, should you take it? Thirdly, what does it cover? And then fourthly, as you probably covered on here, but how can you prepare for it? So let's go into the first one. So the DA100 is the new certification for Power BI, and it allows you to become a certified data analyst associate. So you get this certificate. So I set it back in April, and it's valid for 2 years. So you need to renew it every 2 years. So I will need to renew that in 2022. And if I'd sat the previous exam, I'll need the 7778. So this exam replaces the MCSA. So prior to this, there was the MCSA, the 7778 and 7779. So one was Power BI and one was Excel based, so more Power Pivot, but very similar exams. So to be honest, if you could pass one, you could probably pass both. That exam is still running, so that you can still get that qualification, the MCSA, but it will retire on 31st of January 2021. So you can get it now and it'll be valid for 2 years still. But if you come to renew it, you'll need to take this new exam. So this is the new exam for Power BI. This is the traditional old one. I still see people taking this because they want that certified solution associate title as well. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you can take that now if you wanted to. Otherwise, to be honest, I would recommend, if you are taking an exam now, to take the new one, the Analyzing Data with Power BI, the DA100, and get the Certified Data Analyst Associate. And the reason I'm recommending that is because it's a role-based certification. So the real difference between this exam and this one is the BI reporting were very traditionally Microsoft exams would be very much based on tools. So you'll do an exam on SQL Server or you'll do an exam on Power BI, whereas now it's based more on roles. So even though obviously in this particular case it is tied to a single tool, Power BI, there are other exams tied to wider tools, to a wider set of tools, and it's based more around the role. So it's based around the data analyst role. And actually the style of the questions and the style of the exam is also geared towards that. So it's more scenario based questions. It's less off kind of a memory check on things you can remember about functionality of the tool, and more about, well, how would you achieve this outcome using Power BI? So in my mind, that makes it a much better exam. It's much more relevant. It's much more a better test of skills. In many ways, it makes it much harder though, because if you don't have much practical experience with Power BI, and if your knowledge is quite theoretical, like you've watched videos or read articles or read books, but haven't had the opportunity to do much practical work in Power BI for, at least 6 months, if not a year or two, I think you'll find the exam potentially quite hard. So there's the kind of pro and con with it. Whereas I think potentially you could have got away with, I think, that the earlier exam with more theoretical and less practical knowledge. So just to give you a bit of an idea as to what those kind of exams are. So you've got the role-based certifications, which is obviously Data Analyst Associate is one of those. You've also got the fundamentals ones. So you can see we've got Power Platform fundamentals and Azure fundamentals. So Power Platform fundamentals is looking across the whole Power Platform. So Power BI, Power Automate, Power Apps, and Power BI is still an element of that, but it's much more high level. So actually, if you have a skills and experience across the whole Power Platform and not kind of deep into Power BI, then maybe that's a better qualification, especially if that's the kind of thing you want to do as a role. So if you want to be a Power Platform consultant to do fairly high level, but not get into the detail really of any of those particular tools, but you want to focus on Power Apps and Power Automate and a bit of Power BI, then Power Platform fundamentals might be a better one for you. Azure fundamentals is a lot about the data platform stuff. So we can see here we've got, these are the different kind of areas. So under Power Platform, you've got the Data Analyst Associate, but you've also got all of these other ones. So if you wanted to go more into Power Platform app makers, you can do that. So that's Power Apps specifically, and you've also got ones for Dynamics and Power Platform. So again, if you were interested in Dynamics, you could do that, or if you were really interested in Dynamics, you could go and look and become certified in that particular stack. And obviously Azure is also a huge area as well. You'll see, actually, I should circle both actually, because the Data Analyst Associate is also considered as part of the Azure based structures as well. But then you've also got all the other ones, which is to do with data scientist in Azure. So Azure machine learning, you've got Azure admin, Azure security. There's tons of Azure based qualifications as well. And this DA100, it is fairly standalone. It's not like you need the DA100 to then go into one of these Azure ones or to one of these Power Platform qualifications. It's not a prerequisite for any other certifications or qualifications. It's fairly standalone in that regard, which is quite nice as well, because it means you've earned that qualification in that tool. So just a little bit about what the exam format is. So there's 58 questions. You have up to 3 hours to answer these. You can do it in less, and you can take your time. You can go through them once and then mark questions you're unsure about, come back to those, and you can do that a couple of times. You've got enough time, I think, in the exam to be able to do that. So it's not hugely time pressured. It's all computer based, but it's not based on Power BI at all. So you don't use Power BI in the exam. It's multiple choice, and you're not allowed to use the internet or any material. So when you go into, I mean, I did the initial 7778 in an exam center, and I remember there you go into a room, you're not allowed anything, not even water. Obviously, you can't take your phone, you can't take anything. They just give you a bit of pen and paper to write on, but that computer they give you has no access to the internet. You can't do anything on the screen. And then you can also now do it at home. I mean, you've been able to do it at home for a while, so it's called a proctored exam. And they make sure that you're in a secluded space. You have to take pictures of your workspace to make sure you haven't got little post-it notes on the wall with answers to things. So yeah, no interruptions. So you have to have it in quite a disciplined environment. That's how it works. The passing score is 70%. It's not necessarily about the questions. It's not one mark per question. You do get marks for partially correct answers, and there might be a weighting to it as well, so it's not completely obvious in terms of what they relate to. But you get the results. You get both a score report telling you how you did. I didn't get it straight away because I sat it when it was a beta, but you can see the example of it here where it's saying you got 80%, 90%, 100% in some of these areas. So this is kind of your percentage in each of the areas, and we'll have a look at each of these areas in the next couple of slides. So example format, the question type. Oh, sorry, any questions there? I do feel free to interrupt any questions, by the way. If anyone has any, feel free to ask. That you don't need to hold them till the end. Question types, that the vast majority are multiple choice. So you also have a few other question types like sequence, drag and drops, fill in the blanks, multi-selects, and then you've got a few questions which are kind of case studies. So these are where they give you more detailed information. So they'll give you a block of text or a scenario about a company, and they have this many users. They want to be able to distribute it this way, and then they'll ask you a question, and it might be directly relevant to the question, to the text they've given you, or it might be just somewhat related. So they might ask you to write a DAX statement to achieve what they want to achieve. So something like that. It's those ones are a little bit more challenging, I think, and I'll come back to kind of why that is. And to be honest, when I was doing the exam, the first case study question, I didn't realize there was a whole tab with background information on there. So I was just thinking, okay, that's weird. They've asked me this random question without any real context, and I went through the first couple of questions without realizing it, and I got into the second question, I realized, now this makes a lot more sense. So but then when I did that second question, it was a bit onerous to keep switching back between the question and then trying to find the relevant information back again, or commit that to memory. Again, you haven't really got to write stuff down and things like that. It's not really that kind of exam. So yeah, it's something that could be a little bit challenging, but it's not a big part of the exam. The vast majority of it is these kind of multiple choice type questions. So you don't use Power BI in the actual exam. And so once you finish a section, you can't go back to it. So you do need to go through it section by section. But within a section, you can take your time. You can highlight questions you want to review and come back to, and then you can also flag them for where you want to provide feedback on. And I would recommend you do that. So yeah, you can't write notes during the exam. So again, that's what makes some of this a little bit harder. So bear that in mind. You've got to try and do this all from kind of your own knowledge in your head. So that's kind of. Are there any questions on the exam itself before we kind of move on? If anyone put anything in the chat, Gavin, Catherine?
Nothing in the chat at the moment.
No. Okay, sure. Yep. If there are any questions, do please ask. So next section was going to just look at whether you should take it. And I mean, obviously I think you should, but it's not necessarily as clear cut as that, right? Because so the reasons to take it is it gives you a good goal to work towards. And I want to kind of frame that in a sense of it's a way for you to validate and benchmark your knowledge and experience with Power BI. And this is especially important when actually in your role, you're not necessarily going to work across all the areas of Power BI. It depends on your role. You might just be, for example, building reports based off data models that other people have built. So you don't have then much experience in the data modeling or the data prep side of Power BI. And yet these are areas that are covered in the exam, and they're very good to know. So it's very good to have that breadth of understanding. And actually, if that's one of the things that you want to either demonstrate or that you want to be able to make sure that you work towards, and I say, look, I want to get a coverage across the whole breadth of Power BI, then giving yourself a target to sit an exam that covers the whole breadth of Power BI is a good goal to work towards, I think. But you need to question whether you've spent enough time in that tool working across all of the areas. So before, as I say, it is quite practical based as well. So you want to try and get as much experience as you can across all the areas. So if you are working in a fairly narrow role, that's fine. Pick up some community examples to do stuff. Pick up, go to data.world or whatever. There's about 1 million COVID data sets right now that you could probably get your hands on if you wanted to try some of those. So again, maybe try some of those from the angles that you don't work well that much with. So whether that's data prep or data modeling or data visualization, and challenge yourself with those. And that's advice goes for generally for learning Power BI, but it's also quite important for the exam because it is very practical based. So it allows you to communicate a decent base level proficiency with Power BI. So it's not going to land you a job just having the certification, but if I do bits of recruitment, so I do interviews and things as well for Power BI roles in a company that I work in. And if I see someone with a DA 100 who passed it, I'll be like, okay, that's good. At least I kind of, they've ticked that box. I know they've got that kind of base level of knowledge. If they don't, I assume they'd still have that level of knowledge, and I'd obviously need to tease that out in the interview anyway. And the point is, if someone fails the exam, they're not going to put it on their CV. So it's not really a way for me to be able to judge. But it's nice to be able to see that people have it on their CV that they've ticked that box, they've got that level of proficiency. And it might help you, especially to get into a new role. And often it helps you in your current role. So where I work, I think there's exam bonuses. So if you pass exams, and it's looked upon quite favorably. So for the role that I do as a Power BI consultant, having Microsoft certifications and qualifications is definitely something that they're looking for and that they appreciate. And I think they reward as well, kind of financially. So hopefully your company might pay for you to take it as well. So it costs $165 to take. So see if you can get that. If you work for a company, you should be able to claim that back. If you work for yourself, you should be able to claim it back as a tax expense, as an allowable tax deduction, because it's something that's relevant to your role and to your job. So either way, you should be able to get that money back somehow, or at least some of it. So what does it cover? So there's that they break down the syllabus. So if you just type into search engine Power BI DA 100, the first page that should come up is the exam page, and under there you can go to skills outline, and this will give you all of these different areas. So you've got prepare the data. So there's a lot here. Now, when people are looking at some of these things, they're like, gosh, I don't know about every single one of those. And you come to things like DAX, and you're like, well, I could spend the next 3 years of my life learning DAX, and how, am I still going to be at the level where it says you can write complex DAX formulas? Well, I don't know. So don't take this too literally, right? I think none of, they're not going to test your level of DAX to the level of, have you done the optimizing DAX course by Alberto and Marco, and can you understand all of these nuances? They're not going to go into that level. They're going to check that you could write fairly basic DAX statements, that you understand the basics of row and filter context and things like that. And with the data prep, there might be a couple of things here that you haven't used, right? So again, just familiarize yourself with them is, I think, the main thing. So for example, profile the data. Perhaps you haven't gone in to look at the column distribution, column quality features within the query editor. So have a look at those. It will allow, and familiarize yourself with how they work, what kind of clicks you need to do to get them, what kind of things they show. And then clean, transform, load the data. As long as you've got experience doing these kind of things broadly, I think you'll be okay, right? So most people, if you've done a bit of work in a query editor, you would have done things like combined queries, renamed queries, things like that. And as you're doing things, make sure you're paying a bit more attention to what you're doing as you do these things. Sometimes it's very easy to just know how to do it, but not remember when asked how you do it, because it's you do it almost on autopilot. So actually, if you've got quite a lot of experience in Power BI, you sometimes need to take a step back and think about what you're doing with stuff. And as you're doing it, just think about, yep, I know how to do this, and go through this list as well, and just kind of make sure that you know the kind of clicks involved and the processes involved in these. I say that they're fairly high level. Data modeling. Again, know some of the concepts with these around table relationships, bidirectional filters, many to many. It's not going to be hugely detailed, but these things are quite interesting. So parent-child hierarchy. So again, that might be something you look at and say, I've never done that. So have a look at that online. It's, you could use path function in DAX, for example, to flatten out that hierarchy. Role-playing dimensions might be a term you've come across, might not. If so, everyone's got access to this guide, so have a look at it. It might come up in the exam, it might not, but it's a good thing to know about. Could you have copies of dimension tables that could serve different purposes? So for different fact table fields, for dates, for example. And yeah, some of these things. So again, Q&A, if you haven't used it before, again, just have a look at it, read up on some of these things. Model data is quite big. It's to say, use DAX to build complex measures. That could, that in itself could be easily an exam and easily could take up many months of your life. But I don't think it needs to test it to that level of detail. But if you've been writing DAX for a while, again, you should be able to deal with the level of DAX that they'll ask you in the exam. Optimizing model performance is a really good one. I'm glad I saw that on there, because it's something that's not necessarily thought out that well generally. So it's something that's very, very important in Power BI about how can you optimize your data models, how can you get the size down. So yeah, again, if you haven't looked into that kind of area, then do that. They're not going to ask you questions on storage engine versus formula engine and things like that, but to get to level of detail of how could you bring your model down and what would be the ways for you to optimize this data model, have a think about that. Visualizing. So again, if you've got experience building visuals, I think you'll be fine. There's a lot of the stuff on the formatting options and things like that. So again, pay attention to what some of those things you can do and not do, like additional formatting and things like that. And dashboards, again, if you haven't used them that much, then either just have a play around and see what you can do with dashboards, and also do a bit of reading on the Microsoft Docs. I'll come back to preparation on that one. Yeah, these are all kind of standard features within Power BI. So the other thing I forgot to mention actually is they're not going to test for preview features. So there are still quite a few features, especially maybe on the visualization side, which are still in preview and they won't come on the exam at that time. But obviously the exam is continually updated. And to be honest, if it was me, I would still learn those features anyway, because it's good stuff to know. And you never know, if you happens to come out a preview and then you take the exam and you haven't learnt it, then that's not good. So learn it anyway, but just bear in mind they're not going to ask you for stuff that's still in preview. Analyze the data. So a lot of this is about the AI visuals, so key influencers, decomposition tree. It's really about these and Q&A. So there's a lot of those, and also things like grouping and binning, and things like reference lines on the chart. So I, for example, never really use stuff like that, but actually going into the exam, something I just make sure that I at least know how it works. Deploy and maintain deliverables. I mean, this is a big area. I know it's only 10 to 50% of the exam, but obviously this is everything in a Power BI service. So managing data sets, managing workspaces, distributing, sharing and collaborating content. And those are your kind of main areas. Any questions on that?
No, nothing in the chat in a minute.
Okay. So that brings us to the last point around how you should prepare. So there's
hi, Rishi.
Yeah, hi there.
Yeah.
I have a question. So is this course going to cover any questions from Power BI report server?
Oh, hello.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yep. Sorry, I can hear you now. So what happened there? Oh, sorry. Can you repeat that question?
So my question is the course DA100? Are there any questions from Power BI report server?
Power BI report server. I don't remember specifically, but if there is, it will be. It's not going to be really detailed, right? So again, if as long as you have an awareness of Power BI report server, why you'd use Power BI report server, and kind of what you could do, what the differences are. So actually, one of the Microsoft Docs pages is differences between Power BI and Power BI report server. So if you're familiar with that knowledge, you'll be fine. You don't need. That's one of the areas I would say you don't necessarily need to go out and get huge amounts of practical experience on, because it's a niche area. They're not going to expect you to sit there and work, having worked with report server, and know the intricacies of that.
And there's another question as well, which is kind of along the same lines. Is there anything in the chat? Is there anything related to premium features? Power BI Premium?
Yeah, I think there is. Yeah, I think there is. I'll come on to this in a minute, but when I've done my quizzes, I've put a lot on premium in my quizzes, and probably more so than is in the exam. But I know a lot of people don't have access to premium, and hopefully that will change, with premium per user and things like that. But yeah, if you can only get theoretical knowledge on premium, then that's still better than nothing. I think there is still some stuff in premium. Premium is a big thing in Power BI, right? Those kind of the licensing model, but also some of the features and the use case of it. It's a big thing for Power BI. So I wouldn't go into the exam just saying, right, well, they can't expect me to have done premium because it costs $5,000 a month, and I don't have access to premium, so I'm not going to do it. So for those kind of areas where you don't get as much hands-on experience using it, then try and at least build up theoretical knowledge on it.
Okay, thanks.
And, think about scenarios in which which they'd be applicable, right? Because as I say, the exam, it is obviously still, as I say, it's obviously a theoretical exam in the sense of it's testing knowledge, but the scenario, it's more scenario based. It's more, well, what would you do in a situation? How would you try and achieve something like this? So in terms of how you should prepare, I mean, I'll come to some of that as well, and some of these questions on that. So there's Microsoft Learn. I haven't gone through all of this actually, because this came out fairly recently, and actually I wrote vast majority of my quiz questions before this came out. So I was going to go through them and kind of pick up if there's any other things I wanted to test on here, and I haven't really had a chance to do that yet. But I think it looks, from what I've seen of it, it looks really good. They give you little knowledge checks and things as well, and obviously these questions are not the kind of questions you're going to get in the exam. It's not, if you can answer these, you'll be able to answer the questions in the exam. So don't take these as practice questions. They're just have you actually read this learning Microsoft Learn document. There is also some labs in there as well. Again, I haven't tried those, but I think those would be really good, where you can actually do some hands-on labs experience. Again, I think for Power BI, perhaps you probably have your own environment anyway and your own data sets, but it saves you having to do that. I think it gives you them preloaded with a data set and things like that. So that sounds like it'll be quite good. Definitely have a look through Microsoft Learn. It's all free. So again, if you go onto the DA100 page, the Microsoft one, at the bottom is a link to all of the Learn content, so these learning paths, and they're not massively long, so it's a good thing to go through, definitely. And again, you're looking at this and reading. If all of this stuff makes sense to you in the Microsoft Learns and you get it all, then I think you'll be fine for the exam, right? So it's if there's things in there that are quite new and you don't know, then start to look into it more and make a note of those areas that you're thinking, actually, I haven't really come across this before. Because I can imagine that being quite common, where you haven't come across every good Power BI. I haven't come across every good Power BI, and I've been working with it every day for years. So there are courses, and I'm a little bit loath to recommend courses. I mean, I think they're fairly expensive to do kind of instructor-led courses. Again, this is one of the things that is linked to on the page. I've not done one of these courses, so instructor-led training is one of the options, and they give you then a list of vendors who signed up to provide this specific course. I mean, to be honest, I don't know how much a course will be able to cover in those days. And again, if you get it's a lot of this is down to practical experience. So cramming a whole load of knowledge in 4 days, I don't know how much that would help you in the exam. Maybe it's worth doing. I mean, I do think face-to-face training is good, don't get me wrong, and I don't know if we can even do face-to-face anymore. It's probably virtual, but yeah, I don't know about the courses, but they're there as an option. And if your company's going to pay for you to do it, and why not? It's a good thing to do. I just wouldn't say, okay, if you pay attention for 4 days in a course, you'll definitely pass the exam. I'd be a little bit loath to draw that comparison. There is another course that's done by another of the MVPs called Parker Stevens, BI Elite. So he's got a DA exam prep course. Again, I haven't sat this course, so I haven't enrolled in it, but it's only $29. And I've seen some of his content. It is good, so I imagine the course will be quite good as well.
So just to chip in, Rishi, so I did do that one with BI Elite with Parker, and I found it was really good, but it helped me kind of understand the context of what the learning modules were about. So things like kind of identifying outliers in data and things like that. It just kind of helped me get that context right in my mind before I took the exam.
What does that actually mean? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it was, so you sign up for a monthly subscription at $29, but then you can cancel it in the same month. So it only costs $29 in the end. So I thought it was worth it anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of learning material, but I think courses are good. Definitely. I'm looking to put together courses as well. I'm gonna try and focus my courses, I think, not so much on DA100 and kind of breadth, but focus on kind of specific roles, like almost like the Microsoft certification is, or even particular sectors like finance and things like that. I think that would be where I want to go run courses. But yeah, absolutely, if there's some courses that can cover, it's a broad area to cover the whole of Power BI. Right, so I don't know how much detail they can go into, but yeah, absolutely, courses are always good if you've got time to do this. And then, I mean, one of the best ways I think to kind of prepare for the exam is to kind of try and identify and fill some of those knowledge gaps. And that was really why I put together these set of quizzes on Learn Data Insights, was to help people to use more of a learning exercise than a testing exercise, right? So yes, you can do it and just see what scores you get and see if you get a high exam, but I've made them purposely a lot harder than the real exam anyway. So the idea is that with these quizzes, and I'll do a little demo if we've got time, but the idea with the quizzes is when you take the questions, they also give you feedback straight away and links to where you can learn more. So most of these links are to Microsoft Docs or Microsoft Learn. So actually you could use this very much as a learning exercise. And quizzes, talking of quizzes, Catherine's been on a couple of these, which is where just from Denmark has been hosting a weekly quiz on a Wednesday evening. He's had all of these kind of celebrities on there. Actually, I've done one quiz as well on this kind of DA100 kind of broad across Power BI last season. So these are a lot of fun. Again, these are quite hard. It's not the kind of questions you'd get in an exam. They're probably harder than that and a little bit more abstract than that, but it's still really good because you'll go for one of these topics, like Power BI Embedded or Power BI Premium, and you'll see you'll just learn a lot from the quiz questions and from the answers from it. So I think this is definitely one of the best ways to identify knowledge gaps. So I say not everyone's not going to know everything about Power BI. So actually you want to hone in on the bits that you don't know and then learn a bit more about those. So quizzes I think are a really good way to do it. Have we got a few minutes now? I can show the quizzes.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Cool. So this was powerplatformfinance.com, by the way. I was saying this is the other community. So if we go to webinars, you can see all the stuff that we've done the past webinars. So say we've had some ones on Dynamics. We've had Chris Hamill from the Power BI CAT team go through a session on visual design, and then cash flow statements, commentary apps, Power Automate integration, and then some of these vendors who do financial modeling and planning tools. Andrej, who some of you might know, is a data platform MVP as well, Zebra BI. So looking at how you do visual design. So not directly relevant to the exam, but this kind of stuff is really, really good knowledge if you're into Power BI. So the site for the quizzes is learndatainsights.com. That takes you to this page. And you'll have to log in first. So I've actually already logged in. So if you go to, so you'll see here on the menu, we've got quizzes. So we've got Excel, Power BI, and Python. So the Power BI ones are all geared towards the DA100. And I've got one more actually I'm just going to add, which is a bit more of the kind of, it's aimed more at the case studies. It's a little bit more detailed questions, more role play based. Something I've been experimenting with. I'll put that up shortly. And then we've got some Excel how-to topics and Power BI how-to topics as well. So I've got some example reports and then some topics that I've started writing out. So I haven't done a huge amount on these yet, to be honest, because to be honest, when I'm looking at Google Analytics and seeing what people are consuming on this site, it's almost all these quizzes. So we've had tens of thousands of quiz attempts in the past few months. So clearly these are very popular, and this is where Naveen and I, who I'm working with, are putting our time at the moment. So if we go into one of the quizzes, so you have to log in to take the quizzes, and you can log in with Google, LinkedIn, or Live. So if I just pick LinkedIn, and then we could go to the quizzes. And each question bank for each of these quizzes, so it's broken down into the modules of the exam. So prepare the data, model, visualize. So this is prepare the data. It says it's 20-25% of the overall exam, and there's 100 questions in the bank, and each quiz attempt is 15. I'm actually going to put some shorter ones on there as well, because I can see there's lots of people who don't complete an exam but do sign up, and the only reason they sign up would be to take a quiz. So my suspicion is sometimes this is taking a bit long, and people aren't going to sit there for 15 questions. So I'll put some shorter ones on there as well, where you can do quick five questions or so. The question styles are very similar to the real exam, so mainly multiple choice, but quite a few multiple responses here. I've got quite a few multiple responses in this one. and you get partially correct answers for those multiple responses. And I've also got some sequence, some drag and drops, things like that. So if you put it in, so they'll say it's partially correct, and then it'll give you links to Microsoft Docs where you can learn more about that specific area. And it's got, you can see your score there, so you've got the number of questions and you've got the score at the end. It's probably not a huge amount of point in me going through all of these questions just to get to the end of it. But what I wanted to see is kind of where we get to the end. So add a column from examples. So we'll go through, again, what I've tried to do is make these a bit more scenario based as well. So not just, testing root knowledge, but kind of how would you're working with this data where you need to extract elements of a value. How would you do it? Would you use regular expression? Would you use split by columns or something like this? So again, it's using that functionality, that knowledge, but trying to apply it into a scenario. Right, so that's the bulk of the quizzes. I'm just conscious of time, so let's head back to the last few slides of the presentation. Is there any questions? Any other questions so far?
I guess we have
Paul,
some questions.
So Paul asked
Okay.
if the quizzes are in the same format as the exam.
My questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, similar. So for the multiple
Similar,
choice sections, they're fairly similar. Yeah. So the question types like multiple choice, with a few sequence, drag and drop, those types of questions, they're all fairly standard question types. So it is mainly things like multiple choice, and a few kind of, drag this into the right sequence, or drag the right words into the empty spaces in a block of text or something like that.
Yeah.
So those kind of questions I think are fairly similar in the exam. Any other questions?
No, not now.
Okay. So yeah, hopefully that's a quick demo of kind of the LDI site, and obviously please do give those a try. And if you've got any feedback, there's links to give feedback on specific questions, and then on the front page of the website to give feedback overall. Obviously, just feel free to reach out to me. That'd be great. I would appreciate any feedback on that as well. This is the kind of question I suppose people are asking as well when I show this is, how realistic is this to the real exam? So I say the formats and the types are similar to the main section of the real exam, and they cover similar topics, but they're not in any way exam dumps, right? They're, I don't remember all of the stuff that I did on the exam, and I didn't write questions that I remember from the exam. That would be breaching NDA. So don't do exam dumps. If people claim to have exam dumps, it's illegal for a start, and you'll get your certification revoked if Microsoft finds out. And so yeah, these questions are not so realistic that they mirror the exam at all. But as I say, I've made them a fair bit harder. So I think I've covered more areas than the exam. Like I've covered features that are still in preview, to stay ahead of it. And I've covered features. I've covered much more on stuff like Power BI Premium than I think is in the real exam, that at least I remember. But again, I think it's an important area. So I think for Learn Data Insights, use it as a learning tool. So it's not just practice of, can you do a practice exam, but use those feedback links and read those topics. And do give feedback if a question is unclear. And I think this is kind of a general thing. So having sat there and written lots of quiz questions myself, I've noticed it's quite hard to do this, right? To write questions, and the Microsoft team probably have exactly the same challenge, because it's difficult to provide enough context to a question in a short question, because often with something like Power BI, which could be quite complex, there's multiple ways to do the same thing. The answer could be, well, it depends. How would I do this? Well, actually, it depends on this, this, and this. So then you have to try and provide enough context to say, well, you want to try and achieve this outcome, and actually you need to bear this in mind, so they've got, a limited, whatever it is, those different scenarios. So that's what they've tried to do then. That's why they've done the case study questions. So my advice on that would be for both LDI and obviously for the real exam is it's quite hard to write questions with the appropriate level of context. But one of the things that's easy to do, especially if you've got lots of experience with Power BI, is to overthink it. And so it's a general tip: try not to overthink it, because sometimes I say you could look at it and you think, no, but actually I would do it this way, or maybe you could do it this way. But think about what the question's really trying to get at. So it's trying to understand whether someone knows about the feature of Power BI, knows how to use Power BI in that context. So even though there are nuances which might invalidate what is the correct answer, go with that gut feel about what you think the correct answer is getting at. Does that make sense to you guys? I know that's a little bit of a strange point, but I don't know. I feel that's quite important to get across. So the case study questions do give you more context, but that presents challenges in another way, because then you're going to have to try and remember all that context and apply it. And as I say, for the first set of case study questions, I didn't even actually realize that it provided you all this context. So those it's both sets. If you have lots of context or you have little context, it can make it quite hard. So with where you've got little context in the bulk of the exam, just go with your gut feel, go with what you think they're getting at with the question. Try not to overthink it. And then for the case study, pick up specific clues in the context they give you to be able to answer it. Yep, and then you won't know every question. Have confidence in your ability, and don't use exam dumps. Whatever you do, the exam dumps are where people have gone in and sat the exam presumably multiple times and just tried to remember everything they could from the exam and copy out the questions. So I saw a post this morning actually on the Power BI community site, someone asking for exam dumps, and I've posted on the community site saying don't do this, but clearly people will anyway. Cool. So that was all I had. Any other kind of questions to wrap up?
No, I think there was a couple of other questions about kind of more specifics about which were the hardest parts, and is there any DAX in there? I've answered some of them in the chat. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you've started the exam probably more recently than I have actually. So
yeah.
You've probably got a better memory of this stuff than I do anyway as well. I mean, I've always been like that with exams. When you kind of cram for them, or especially when you do that, but you come out of an exam and I don't remember anything. It's like a blur. Oh. It's like a complete mind blank. So, which is good, because otherwise I would be breaching NDA. So it's probably quite a good thing in my case that I can't remember what was actually on the exam.
Can I say something on this? Mm-hmm. I also made the exam already, and I thought it was pretty difficult actually.
I agree.
Well, not really difficult, but different than I thought of. It's not just learning. It was important what you said about not being on your autopilot, because the exam is really about having it all done. I mean, I've seen print screens and they showed you things, and you had to answer what were the options that have been chosen here. Well, normally you just click something and you don't know what happens, but it was the other way around. So that made me get confused a bit. So that's why I found it a strange question. And the case studies are difficult too, because there's a lot of text and you actually have 3 or more stories in one text, and you have to go back and forth, etc. And so you have to really separate a few stories while answering questions.
Yeah, so I found that the most challenging part of the exam.
Yeah.
But as I say, the other way around, where they don't give you any context, makes it hard as well, because then you're thinking, you tend to overthink it. You think, well, actually, maybe it could be this, or maybe it could be this, actually, because it depends on the context of the scenario, and they haven't given you that much information for you to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what I'm saying. You see these questions, even Donald's saying he's seen me on Just quiz. So yeah, I mean, even with those questions as well, right? And Donald will probably agree with that as well. You're thinking that, and you second guess yourself a few times on the questions, because they've just asked you a question, and actually, because there's multiple ways to achieve the same thing, you don't necessarily know which one is getting that. So go with your gut feel in terms of, well, if I was asking this question and I was testing someone on Power BI, what would I be trying to get at with this question?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's rather than thinking about all the possible things that you could probably do.
Yeah.
In terms of minimum number of years experience, I mean, I'd say at least 6 to 12 months of working with Power BI. But I mean, it's obviously not hard and fast rule, but I think you do need a bit of experience of working with it. I think it's much harder to pass this exam with just purely theoretical knowledge rather than practical.
I don't think you would make it with just learning. I mean,
I think you have to have had some experience and had probably your fingers burned at least once by making mistakes in designing reports and so on, because then that's kind of how you learn to do them properly. And I think that the scenario based questions I found were interesting, but I think that the setup of the proctoring, I didn't find that an enjoyable experience at all.
No.
And I think that so I had my laptop and I had a big screen attached to my laptop that wouldn't let me have that. I said I can only work on a laptop. So you switching between screens between the case study text and then the actual questions, and it was a little bit, a little bit like that. But
yeah, they're very strict on the proctoring. Like you can't have anything open, like stuff in your taskbar. You can't. I got called out a few times for covering my face, which I probably should be doing
me as well.
every time anyway. But yeah, absolutely. So how many scenario-based questions? Yeah, so I think there was two. Is it two sets of scenario questions and about 3 to 4
I had
each? Yeah.
two. Yeah. And
yeah,
two
scenario-based questions, but I think the vast majority are the kind of multiple choice and stuff like that. And I think I've been looking at my scores. I think that's where I messed up actually on the case study ones. Any questions on M language? Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure there are. Again, I mean, they're not going to test every single thing on kind of M functions and stuff like that. And it'll be things like, but you won't have to know what some of those M functions are. But to be honest, most of them you could read as English, right? And you can kind of work out what they're doing and things like that. So I wouldn't sit there and study the whole M language, but have a feel for what those formulas look like and what they kind of do. So when you do something through the UI, have a feel for how it is looks in the query code as well. And then yes, I see Gavin's asking as well. So kind of the DAX questions, there are quite a few fill in the blanks with those, I think. So you just fill in the blanks to drag calculate or all, or where would you put them? So stuff like that is kind of how you do it. Gavin say the same thing as well about going back and forth. Cool. I think that's it. Yeah, no notes. That was a bit annoying. I think when I did the exam initially, I'm sure they gave me a little whiteboard and pen thing, not a little piece of paper and a pen thing. So I'm sure I could take notes in the first time when I sat at an exam center. But yeah, I think this time around they didn't. I wasn't allowed to have any pen or paper or anything on my desk at all, which is a bit annoying.
I think sometimes when you're reading a question on screen as well, you can tend to read it out to yourself out loud.
Right.
And I was even kind of told by the proctors not to do that as well. And I was like, oh, okay. Can't cover your mouth, can't make a noise, can't talk. And I guess, that they want to make sure no one's cheating and everything else. And I understand that, but it was, that they were very on the ball, let's say.
So how I prepared. So I actually prepared for the exam by writing quiz questions. Well, that was the initial exam I did. I wrote that was the initial exam I did 2 years ago. 17778 779. I did a quiz as preparation for it, and actually that was my prep for it, and that's where this whole thing came from 2 years ago. And then this time round, to be honest, if you've been using Power BI for a number of years like I have, you don't need to specifically prepare for it, right? It's just you'll know the knowledge you know at that point. But have a scan through those skills, and just if there's anything that you're just like, oh, haven't come across that before, just go and look it up. And that's what I'm saying, identify those knowledge gaps, right? So if you can do quizzes and stuff like that, then that's a good way to do it. Go through the Microsoft Docs. To be honest, I went through the Microsoft Docs, the Microsoft Learn materials. Yeah, exactly. If you're reading through the Microsoft Learn materials and you recognize all the stuff that they're talking about in there, you'll be fine. And actually, the Microsoft Learn stuff, where I did find things were really useful, things like like key influences, a decomp tree. So it's not for those things. For example, I haven't used them a great amount, or at least I hadn't, especially when I sat the exam. So I was like, okay, I'm not sure if I know enough to be able to answer specific questions on it. But the Learn docs go through that in quite a lot of detail. So just by reading that, I had enough to know what to do.
I took a Udemy course. It was very useful as well, because then you get all the topics that are on the exam requirements.
Which course, sorry?
Well, I posted 2 Udemy links
Oh,
in
Udemy.
the chat. Yeah,
Okay.
and they have this cheap action, so it cost me only €10 or so this course. So it's
Yeah.
it's worth the money, and it's a video course with testing, etc. So you could just pick out the topics you like. I mean, you can leave the rest, but all those things you don't know about, well, you could just watch the video and then it's okay.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's as I'm saying, it's quite a lot of there's a lot of material. Like Power BI is a very broad area, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how much a course would cover kind of the full breadth of it. Which is why I'm saying when I'm doing courses, I'm thinking of doing them quite niche and focused rather than broad. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think all of this stuff is good, but you never have to pay £200 for a course on Udemy. You'll find it for £10 normally, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. You sign up, you look at a couple of courses, then you go away for a couple of days, and that's when you get the special offers coming in.
There you go. Exactly. There you go. There's the trick. Great. Well, thanks. I know I ran a little bit over there, but no, thanks for your time and attention, everyone. And if anyone does have any questions or then as well, just drop me an email and let me know anything about your experiences with stuff as well. It'd be good to hear some other people who've taken the exam or taking it and preparing, and good to hear some more experiences, especially if you try some of the quizzes on the site and what you think. That'd be great.
Thanks very much.
Great.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Rishi.
All right. Cheers then. Speak soon.
Yes, thanks very much.